Could I have your attention, please? So, first of all, welcome. Thank you for coming. It's so lovely to see so many faces and in person as well. So, hopefully, you'll get a better experience being here in the room. You can also get food and alcohol, which you obviously can't get online. So, thank you. Right. So, my name is Mary-Ann Clark. I'm the chair of the HVAC group, and so we're here today with the Young Engineers Network. And Jen, I'm going to introduce in a minute. And we're here to talk about lessons learned. So it's all strictly confidential. So we've warned the panel not to mention any client names because you never know. But if you want to just move on to the next slide. So just to touch on, to join any of our groups, you can go onto the CIBSE website and you can either follow us on LinkedIn and you can sign up as a member. I'm sure it's probably the same process for the young engineers as well. So if you're not members, please do click and join. So one thing I did just want to touch on before we start is one of the themes for this year for CIBSE is becoming a STEM ambassador. So I just wanted to mention to everybody in the room that wasn't aware, CIBSE have a STEM ambassador scheme, which they're joint with STEM as a partner. And if you just move on to the next slide, there's a few there. Oh, that's it. Oh, that's it. Perfect. So, right. So in summary, it's all about getting information out to the next generation, encouraging schools and school leavers to get involved in engineering. So you can log on to the CIBSE website. I think it's cibse.org/STEM if you want to sign up as an ambassador. So we just need to try and encourage some people to do that as well. So I'm now going to pass over to Jennifer Cox, who's the chair of the Young Engineers Network, and she's going to do a quick introduction. Are we sitting down now, or are we? We haven't rehearsed this clearly.
Thank you very much. Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you very much, Mary-Ann. I know the Young London are really pleased to be working with HVAC group on this. I think it's an important conversation that Yen are involved in, trying to do this sort of knowledge sharing, understanding a little bit better. Before I quickly introduce our panel, we're just going to be talking about lessons learned. So we want to share from each other, learn from other projects, and make sure we maintain the sort of best approach throughout the industry. We've had a lot of talk about in preparation for this session, so I think it should be a really interesting discussion. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves. So can you welcome Julian, Mark, Ted, and Mary-Ann.
You sit in the order.
But there you go.
Thank you. It's so confusing.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. First of all, I know you've all got lots of lessons to share. It's interesting to hear. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. Just a quick introduction about what you've done in your careers, how you started, and how you sort of got to where you are.
So my name's Julian Barker. I originally I've been in the industry for a while. Originally went to university in South Africa where I did a 4-year honours degree in electrical engineering, so it's not building service related at all at the time. And I sort of in South Africa, the accreditation, the equivalent of chartership would be professional engineering status, which I got around about 2000, which we age as well. I then decided I wanted the next adventure, so I moved to the UK. Lots of nice projects, lots of big scale projects, refurbishments, and everything, and it's been fantastic. Really enjoyed it. So I sort of through my career, so I then got chartered around about 2005 through CIBSE. Worked for various large consultancy practices around London. In 2011, I started Loop Engineering. So we are a building services consultancy. We work across all the different sectors, different clients. So, and now we're up to where we are now.
Mark?
So hi, I'm Mark Pike, currently working for Overbury. Slightly different, I haven't got a MEP background as such. My father was an architect. So I left school in a long time ago, 1991, went full-time university at Loughborough and did a commercial management and quantity surveying degree. I was luckily sponsored throughout that by 15 of the main contractors at the time. Interestingly, in '95, when I graduated, 6 of those companies were no longer operational. So that was the recession in the early '90s. But so I've worked in main contracting my whole career. Started in the new build world, which is now Skanska, for 5 years, and got fed up and chasing curtain walling contractors over across Europe for missing materials.
I thought you said you were touched them.
Yeah. So moved into the fit out world, and the interesting thing for me now, in the 5 years I worked in new build, I've probably worked on only 4 projects. And now at the moment at Overbury, we're generally doing, in my team alone, about 14 projects a year. So got a varied experience of lots of different challenges. And that's what's great about this industry. Everything is different, everything is new, and especially for me. So I'm on the panel here from more refurbishment side as well. So I can offer you, I think we're going to talk about new build, but the additional things you may need to encounter when you're dealing with existing spaces that are being converted for new tenants. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Ted Pilbeam, Building Services and Sustainability Director for VolkerFitzpatrick, who are multidisciplinary main contractors. I'll caveat now that we don't, and definitely try not to do residential. We leave other people to do them. I escaped school when I was 16 and actually started off as a plumbing apprentice. Then realised quite quickly that I was doing heating and ventilating, not plumbing. So I ended up doing both BTEC certificates in plumbing and by additional units going to additional night school, doing HVAC as well. Started my apprenticeship with a company that you might know, Crown House, but that was with the international side. So my first ever experience of site was actually in the sulphate to Denmark when I was 17. Then worked through my apprenticeship, then worked for, again, a building services consultancy on a range of projects. And some of the things, it can get quite boring when you start talking about projects and what have you. So I sort of tend to like to spin it a different way. I've been on stage at the Royal Opera House, not I've cooked in 5-star restaurant, hotel. I've driven the opposite way down a runway with an F-35 coming in the opposite direction. We're so close that the pilot could actually wave at you and you can see the pilot. And that is just a glimpse into the sort of MEP world that you will go through, because I think this is a completely unique industry in as much as you see behind the scenes of an awful lot of places that so many other people don't ever see. I guarantee that everyone on your journey through life to sort of where I am now will see and have similar stories and what have you to tell. Outside of that, I'm also, for my sins, chair of CIBSE Knowledge Management Committee. So they're responsible for all of the CIBSE publications and knowledge that comes out, making sure that it's right, robust, and timely. And I'm also, as you might have seen or known, definitely am that, that I'm also on the CIBSE Training and Development panel.
Yes, thank you. So Mary-Ann Clark, I'm the chair, as I mentioned, of the HVAC group. I work at ACOM as well. I started, as we were all doing careers, I started my career, I was at school, and my technology teacher invited me to the 150th anniversary of the Mechanical Institute, and I realised that that was I sat there and realised it was something that I could do and I could be part of and I could make a difference. So I signed up quickly to do mechanical engineering at university. I did a placement, and within that placement, I did a building services placement. And I fall in love with it. So I couldn't get another job. but I did obviously fall in love with it, and part of doing a mechanical engineering degree, I was working with automotive and aeronautics, and for me, I found building services a slightly softer engineering, and everything to do with sustainability and all that side of it really appealed to me. So after I accepted the role, I was working at a company called SVM for 18 months, and then I I went for an interview at AECOM, and I've been there since. I've been there nearly 20 years, so it feels like quite a long time. But within that time, I've never been bored. The job has literally sort of almost revolved around me. I started off working on St Pancras Hotel. I've worked on colleges. I've worked on hospitals. More recently, I've been working on residential. Not residential, I'll try and stay away from residential as well, commercial, but I have touched on residential as well. And more recently, and this is really why I'm sat here, I've been doing a lot of client building, business development with clients, really trying to understand where the client sits within all the work that we're doing. So these guys are going to talk sort of more maybe on the contractual side and design. So I just wanted to bring that slightly different perspective at how clients see engineers and contractors, and you know, at the end of the day, they're the ones that are putting the money, and they're the ones that have got the products that they want built. So that's summary of me.
Thank you very much. So just so you guys are aware, so when we had a bit of a preparation meeting, I think we had a very interesting discussion. I think a lot of it, we were talking for a while, weren't we, about various lessons that we'd all sort of gone through. And from that came a bit of structure. We would realise that a lot of what we were talking about sort of mirrored the REBA stages. So that's what we're going to try and sort of think about our discussion tonight on. That saying, please shout if you've got any questions. It's a discussion, so if you've got any thoughts or want to add anything in, let us know. Similarly, Matt, you're looking online, so if you've got any messages, just
I'll try again.
Yeah. So to kick off, I'm going to ask Julian to use that from sort of a designer's point of view.
Yep.
How can we sort of improve the sort of overlaps and transitions between REBA stages? You know, looking at that sort of early stages, the stage 0, stage 1 concept, moving into the more detailed design, and obviously sort of into construction.
I mean, from my experience, it's so yeah. When you initially sort of starting a design, I think it's early sort of REBA stages. I think it's incredibly important to sort of understand where the client's coming from and understand the client's brief. And I think as you sort of get more experience, it's sort of just asking all the questions, actually sitting down, workshops and everything, just try and understand, gather as much information as you possibly can at those early stages, because that will basically streamline the rest of the process. So as you're sort of going through the REBA stages, and I think that's why we kind of touched on the REBA stages, it's important to sort of, for young engineers with all the enthusiasm, you want to just dive in and do a design and get something done because you've got that experience. Whereas I think it's quite important that you actually go through all those the kind of the milestones, and that's why the sort of the REBA milestones are there. Is so initially to checking the feasibility, initially getting concepts together, actually from a young engineer's perspective, actually making sure you understand the concepts, speaking to your mentors, discussing it, and basically making sure that it's fit for purpose and best suited, and then basically getting buy-in. And I think a lot of the design development is about sort of just getting that consensus as you go through, and doing a design by yourself at your desk is not the best solution. It always has to be an interactive process, and that's part of the nice thing about our industry is that it is very people-based, and you are always having that interaction. So I would say, so during the early phases, speak to people as much as you can, speak to your other disciplines, speak to the clients, speak to or structural engineers, the architects, basically just gather as much information as you possibly can.
I think allied to that, and a lesson that is actually a big skill. It's a massive skill of actually listening and understanding what clients actually want. We had, and I better not name them, but we had a client of very, very intelligent, I would call them dolphins, they would blow my mind. And could we get them to articulate what they actually wanted? And we ended up employing a design consultant to actually come in and tease out of them precisely what they wanted. To be honest, I would have lost patience. But there is a skill set in that, and if you can learn it and get it and understand it, because it's understanding the right questions to ask without any necessarily preconceived ideas, and then being able to just follow that almost thread of, he said or she said something like this or something like that. And then you get to understand what the client actually wants. And that is so important, because if you're not careful, it becomes a game of Chinese whispers and everything then unravels. So that point and the part that Julian's articulated is so vital that you get that bit right and get that bit understood. And if there's one lesson to learn for me from that, is if you don't understand it, then you're on a hide into nothing in the first place. So do not be afraid to keep saying, I'm sorry, I still don't understand what you want.
It's keeping the communication between.
Yeah, and keep it going. And do not be afraid of that. And you can ask it as many times as you like, because ultimately when you do, you will be doing far better service to whoever you're working with.
I think you said about the interaction as well. It's also your interaction, I think, as the MEP engineers with the architectural teams, as well as managing their expectations as well. And from an end user and maintenance point of view, about how to operate the information, we're incorporating it into their architectural design. I think from a contractor, the number of discussions I've had about, I don't want any access panels, and that's mainly because their expectations have not been managed. So the architects about, you've got this equipment, it needs to be regularly maintained, it needs access, and we're having to do it as the build contractor, when those discussions could be had at an early stage, and then they could actually potentially design something differently, that we can move equipment, or we can actually make it a feature in a way of this access. And that's what we find as well, about that early engagement needs to be, and time is probably the pressures that I think clients could need to learn, is having more time to allow you guys to develop that design a little bit further, so that then when the contractor is coming on board, it is in a better situation and it is more buildable, shall we say. So
I mean, sorry, I love this, because recently, I'm going off piece slightly, but it's all, we're talking all about the same thing here. Access panels. So I am a building services engineer, and I was very fortunate to put let's just say I put a kitchen into my house. And the backing, we drilled a hole. My husband said, we've got to make this hole as small as possible, so that it's nice and neat for the backboard. So we drilled a hole that was this big, and I somehow managed to, because of the washing machine that I had, pass it up, bring it down, squeeze it in. It was great, absolutely great, until I just recently put a new washing machine in. Could I get my hand in that hole? And I'm like, I am a competent engineer, and I have been persuaded by my husband, the client, to make it as small as possible. And so, to be fair, he did come and drill a bigger hole for me. The point is, that cost money. Well, it didn't, but in general terms, if that's your client and they're saying, I want to have, a client came to me and said, this was on one of the projects, again, we won't mention names, here's a shelf, I want you to put a water storage tank on that. And I'm like, well, there's no headroom, I can't possibly do that. And he's, go away, and come back when you can put a tank on that. How on earth do I do this? Anyway, I did, to be fair, I thought I'm not going to get anywhere because you do get some plants that are quite headstrong. So I went away and I thought about it, and I thought I really can't get the tank that you want. It was a water tank they wanted, and I said you can't get it on because you need access. Access again, what we're talking about. So, but I did manage to get a fuel tank on the, and he was over the moon because I hadn't been able to give him what he wanted, but I'd given an alternative. So always be thinking, because you can always push back. You know, when you're in design at those early stages, because it doesn't cost money.
And yeah, don't be scared to push back.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to come away so that you don't have that.
That's, I mean, if there's one thing that a building services engineer is always going to be pushed on, is ceiling voids, riser spaces, plant spaces, and it's having that confidence that you can actually stand your ground. Sometimes it's a case of actually saying, I'm not going to commit now, take it away, draw it out, explain it, actually demonstrate it to the architect, demonstrate it to the client that that's the space you require, because fighting those battles early, we're kind of stand you instead, kind of going along the line.
And from it, and again, like you said about knowing what the client wants, I know from an electrical point of view, the number of times we've had late AV contractors making major changes to power requirements, potentially heat requirements as well. IT direct contractors who then design in the comms rooms, and again the heating requirements and the power requirements there, the UPS requirements, they all come in late. And like you're right, sometimes we're already done the designs and we're always having to do it twice, or ask for that information as a contractor. And when it's known all along, we're going to put AV in meeting rooms. We know what furniture we're talking to. We know we're going to need this, and we're going to do the electric desks these days. It's things like that. So.
You're so right, and there's a mad notion that whatever you do not involve the end user. It's madness. Do not involve the end user. What do they know? They're only the people that are going to use the plumbing facility that you've designed. Do not involve them, because that's going to cost more money. Yes, it will, if you involve them at the end.
Yes.
Yeah. Because you've already installed it, you've already fitted it, you've already designed it and gone through the whole process. Whereas if you actually shove it to them when it's at design stage in the early phases, how much does it take to rub something out or delete something on CAD or in a BIM model and move it slightly? Often the quantity of sockets, the temperature isn't going to increase, the space isn't going to suddenly change, might get remodeled to suit their needs. But ultimately, if you do it early, A, the cost doesn't increase, B, they know what they're getting, and B, they're then signed up to it as well and they understand it. And we also, as engineers, are a bit lax, and it's far better than it used to be with 3D, BIM and what have you. We don't necessarily understand that clients sometimes won't admit to the fact they can't read drawings. And again, it's going through those phases of making sure that they understand what they're getting. And some of the best buildings done, and I've been involved in, are the ones that the actual end users have been all over like a rash and have been absolutely crystal clear what they want. The building that I was referring to earlier, once we managed to tease out from the boffins in plain English what they wanted, they got exactly that, and the building's fantastic.
I think that's a really interesting point. So something we were talking about earlier, I'm just going to jump on that a little bit. How important is understanding that? So Marianne, you mentioned earlier part of your role around client relationships. How much important is that in understanding, even before you get to a project start, you know, that discussion early on as on the consultancy side, but also with the contractor, how important is that relationship to be able to sort of predict that and not be starting sort of blind almost?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we started the whole conversation about the Reba stages, but for me, a lot of what the work that I've been doing recently is actually even before that. it's really understanding what is keeping the client up at night, actually. And depending on what organisation you work for, I mean, I'm quite lucky that we're a multidisciplinary company. So I'm not there just talking about MEP. I'm thinking about all the other things that go with that. And you're not necessarily working with people that are within your own company, but you've always got to be talking to the, going back to a collaboration with the architect, the structural engineer and the client. But for me, a lot of anticipating what is coming down the line is really important. So there might be, if you build up those relationships with your clients, and it might not be something that you're doing at this stage, but for the younger engineers, but it is something, if you build those relationships now with architects, with clients, stay in touch with them, because you never know what's coming down the line. And you can always pick up the phone or send an email, how are you? You bump into people. This industry, although it's massive, it is very small. And so you will regularly come back to clients that got buildings. And so I think that was my point, is even before the REBA stages. And what I thought was quite interesting, Julian, what you said about the different stages. As for those, let's say, early careers that are in the room, how many people have actually worked on a feasibility, or have you just jumped straight in to the design? Because actually, as a graduate coming out of university, what is the most efficient thing we can give you is calculations. Well, calculations come at stage 4. I nearly went old school and started stage. I don't know if I've been around that long. But yeah, so stage 4, and that's when the detail comes in. So you just need to have that awareness if you can get it, but it's really quite difficult, I think.
Sorry to stop someone. Maybe we could talk about this forever. There's a couple of questions.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Come in.
Hi, thanks. I was going to ask about the tension between an architect and an engineer. So, and I think it's particularly relevant designing low carbon buildings, sustainable buildings, where traditionally the architect is interested in the appearance of the sculpture and the finesse of the beauty of the building, and then the sustainability consultant or engineer will think about, we need more space for equipment, and we want less glass on the facade. How do you deal with strong characters? Often architects are better at practicing their strength of objective than the humble engineer or sustainability consultant. They pull rank. How do you deal with that tension?
So I try and remind clients that, or the team, that at the end of the day, actually under a contract, there's an employer. It's not a client, it's called an employer. And then we're all employed by that same person. So the idea is that if we are fighting amongst each other, that employer is employing us all to work together to be as one. And so reminding, shall we say, awkward other consultants or members of the team to say, even as the contractor as well, we're all technically working for the employer who is employing us to do X, and then we should all work together to deliver X. It's never, you're right, it is a tough discussion at times, but I think we just have to remind the people at the end of the day, we're all employed, and if we work together and achieve this for the goal, the client himself, or the employer, so gets what he wants for the money he wants when he wants it. And that's what we're all there to do. Or her, sorry.
It's a really good question, Ashley. And it sort of segues into something I was going to say even before you asked the question, is if you think about a project, whatever project, doesn't really matter, but a construction project, I defy you really to find anything in the facets of that project that isn't touched by a building services / sustainability person. Which is a bit of a challenge for you. If you think of any, let me know. But nearly everything that is involved in that project, somewhere along the line, be it structural, architectural, sustainability, CO2 cost, landscape, anything, substructures, all tend to have some implication from a building services perspective. And I think now we're just beginning to get onto the cusp of actually raising the profile from that lowly downtrodden engineer into real valuable professional people. And from my experience, certainly in the last 5 odd years, the input and the impact that a building services engineer, designer, contractor, installer, commissioning engineer, facilities management person can have on a building is far more important than many of the other facets. And therefore, I think that whole piece about breaking down that tension and actually getting in early. I mean, the frustration often is, from my point of view, and I sort of guess yours, is sometimes when you're tendering projects, you'll get a load of detail architecturally, what they want it to look like. You'll get loads of detail structurally, because they'll have already done the calculations and they'll probably oversize it, goodness knows. Anyway, but the building services, and to a degree sustainability element, but that's getting better, always comes last, and is always seen to come last. So to the engineers, they're almost playing catch up.
How can we be, I guess, from a, again, sort of more consultancy side, how can we be more proactive in those discussions with your clients, with your architects, as part of the wider design team?
I mean, I think to your point as well, as on with sustainability and sort of energy efficiency becoming such a hot topic, is engineers need to sort of step up and sort of be able to put that advice forward very early on in the process, where, yeah, historically we just the architects used to do the design. We'd say, okay, well, your design's frozen, we'll start.
Yeah.
And those days are gone. I think these days, I mean, you have to sort of, the concepts and everything need to sort of be established sort of really, really early with the architects, and sort of workshopped, and a lot of the form of the architecture now needs to also sort of adapt to suit the MEP as well, which is something the architects might not be used to. So
Matt, this question.
Yes, I was wondering if I could hear some thoughts on what I always view as a fairly interesting time of design, which is like when, as an engineer, you get novated and your client goes from being the client and then you're working for the contractor. Because to me, that's always seemed like a bit of an interesting change of, I guess, whose priorities you're trying to follow. Like originally, you're almost not against the contractor, but you're trying to get the client the best deal for money. But then you switch over to then having to work for the contractor. So I feel like there's a bit of a tension there in terms of how you balance the relationship.
I'll be honest, I must admit, I think the industry at the moment, I've come across novated architects, but often the novation, they did not novate the MEP engineers, which I've found recently, because I guess a lot of the reliance of the design is completed by the specialist in the stage 4 onwards. If you're thinking about self-certified fire alarm systems, all the life safety systems, sprinklers, and the like, often that is completed anyway by the trade contractors that are working under ourselves, or even under our MEP subcontractors as well. So I must admit, I've not come across it personally. I could understand why it becomes a bit of tension as well, because again, your designs, certain elements can go all the way through to stage 6, but there's certain elements we're still reliant on a third party again, aren't we? So I'm as to say, we often go and say, and actually encourage clients with architects. We're happy for them to novate across. Often it's not even a novation these days. It's actually a please retain my architects, but under a separate agreement. So the client retains what he calls its client monitoring team, with some colleagues of the architectural practice, and then other colleagues come and work for me. And often it's the younger people, and it's a good learning curve for them. Probably that they get brutalised by us builders, I guess. But the MEPs often stop at stage 3, and then you're the design guardians to ensure that the specialist design that we often procure through our DMB subcontractors, because then they can go right the way through from the stage 3 to the as-builds, the commissioning records, and then obviously the client familiarisation and potentially maintenance as well. So it is. I could understand it would be a real tricky one. Does it happen often? I don't know. How many times has people in the room done?
I mean, we work both sides, right? I mean, we've done a lot of designs for clients. We'll do it up to stage 3 or stage 4, but we've also done a lot of work for contractors as well, sort of picking up at 3 and 4 and sort of working through. So, but in most of the cases, those have been sort of independent sort of appointments. We haven't. I don't think in the last sort of 10 years we've actually had a proper novation over. I mean, I think maybe a little bit of that's our preference. I mean, we think in a lot of cases it will be if you sort of appoint by a client, there'll be an existing relationship with the client there that you want to maintain. And I think to your point, you can perhaps find yourself being a little bit conflicted because all of a sudden, yeah, you were previously more interested in the look and feel and the quality of the product. All of a sudden, you're focusing on cost and
you're working for a nasty.
So can we just add what, and it won't take long, just to add on that, lessons learned, feasible generic, feasible the other one.
Yeah.
Just be really careful because as if you're designers, you can slip up with wording contracts to make sure you're not signing up to totally installation on a design side point of view. And I'm sure that contractors among us will say something slightly different. But
I'll be very blunt. We do have both. It does strike me as absolute bonkers that you have people that have been involved all the way through from conception to sort of read a stage 3, and then they suddenly stop. And then you then have a whole new set of design team that then all start over again. I think that might change, and we're certainly seeing from a main contractor point of view, not so much from a services viewpoint, but dare I say it from an architectural point, architects, bless them, can no longer fully design anymore on their own because they do need and have to involve the specialist supply chain to be able to complete that design. God forbid. But from my point of view, I actually quite like where the M&E consultant isn't novated. And the reason I like it is because it means that there is a professional working with the client to advise the client. And 9 times out of 10, I don't know that's at the back, it gives it you have somebody to actually hand the job over to. And for me, from a commissioning point of view, that is so important. There is nothing worse than commissioning. And you've got a whole set of commissioning sheets that you want somebody to witness, and they go, huh? What?
That leads back into that sort of communication relationship.
Exactly, and it's that. And again, a lesson learned is think about that right at the very start. Who is going to accept what you've designed and say, yeah, that's right. The Building Safety Act is going to, you're going to have to, and people are going to want you to do it. And it's absolutely right that you do. But we just need to make sure that it's absolutely crystal clear. What do you want to do? What do you want to see? What do you want to witness? What do you want to inspect? Fine.
So that leads on very well to a point I'm looking for. A question we had in a minute, but there was a question in the audience.
Yeah, I was just saying, I've worked in consultancy, but I've moved into contracting now. And just from a services point of view, often we would get a different designer in from stage 4 to 5 or 3 to 5, because if you have the same designer doing it all the way through, it can sometimes be a bit of the checker checking his own work.
Yeah.
A, and B, also, if you put a fresh set of eyes just from a general human point of view, it's not about trying to find issues, but like maybe you can do it another way, and and then B, opportunities and things like this. So often you wouldn't really innovate the design consultant from.
And just going back to the start, when we said about when you're even starting at stage 0, getting to know what the client ultimately wants. We as the principal contractor now are saying as our requirement from a stage 3 on a D&B delivery as a contractor, our program's saying first 2 weeks we want familiarisation workshops with the client's design team. So we want the architects involved with our design manager stroke our architects. We want the MEP engineers, and let's have a day's workshop. And it may be that we're doing it as a bit of a social and also kick off the meeting as well to get to know people, get to understand, do that interaction. And then last thing we want to do is go straight off to our stage 4. 4 weeks later, we present the design and you're all going, what the hell is this? This is like complete rubbish. We've wasted everybody's time. So it's quite nice to say that, have that, you've said at the start before you do your initial designs, have that understand what the client wants. We do understand what the design team were intending so that we can capture it in our next stages.
There is always that bit, and you're absolutely right, of somebody picking up that design at Reader stage 4 and 5 and then going, yeah, well, let's find everything that's wrong with it, completely change it. Why did they put the risers here? Why did they undersize the plant room? Why is there plasterboard ceilings? Blah, 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 blah. The truth is, they haven't just made it up. But for whatever reason, we don't communicate.
Right.
And the amount of times where we'll speak to a client and say, is it all right if we get hold of the services consultant during the tender period? And they go, no, just put it on a TQ. But you can't articulate things on a TQ. And the more dialogue you can have, you'll save weeks of thinking I can do this and I can value engineer that and I can change that, because 9 times out of 10 it's already been thought through, but it's just not been articulated necessarily.
I guess following on from that, and again that sort of client relationship side, what about the other ends? What about post completion? What about you're looking at the uptake of things like Neighbours that looks at energy monitoring a lot more, and as you mentioned earlier about the commissioning, be able to hand off to somebody. How does that? What can we learn? What from that?
So commissioning is, I think, for clients probably one of the biggest veins of their life. And I suppose I'm sure you guys have got more to say on this, but from a client's point of view, they are expecting a product, they just want to know it's going to work. And I suppose, and they need to make sure that they've got their FM team on board. So training is really, really important. If you turn around and say, oh, here's your BMS, here's your systems here, and the contractor provides no training, and I'm sure that does not happen here, then that's really going to be detrimental to the way the whole system works. And not only that, is what was the design intent in the first place? So the Neighbours, it's you as engineers, we can no longer hand the building over and run away. It just can't happen. We have to be having follow-ups with the client to ensure that the building is still years later really performing as we intended. And not only that, with Neighbours, how can we reduce the energy, because that's what we need to be.
I think a lot of the reason the Neighbours and these sort of things have come into place and become popular is because the clients aren't getting what they were promised. And a lot of that is down to not being properly commissioned, not being properly set up. And it is, I mean, part of it is every single building that we deliver is bespoke, and it is so specialised. And then you look at how light the handovers often are. It's like, how good are the as-built drawings?
You spend years designing this building.
It's left at the end. It's not only handing over to the FM, it's just making sure, I mean, as engineers, checking the O&Ms, checking that they're descriptive, checking that the staff have the right training. Commissioning is absolutely essential, making sure the system's actually, I mean, you put a lot of effort into selecting these systems, designing them. We're duty bound to actually make sure it's delivered properly. And I think that's also why the REBA in use has kind of come up recently as well. We don't always have fees for it, but it's
Ignore Phil. Sorry.
Will that not change the golden thread anyway? This whole implementation.
Well, that's exactly, I think, the intent.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But what I was going to make is you have to have a license to drive a car. But who drives the building?
Idiots.
The big issue we often face is, like I said, having somebody to hand the building over. We had one particular job, big office block. The client had their end user involved all the way through, who's going to run the building at the end of the project to us. They sacked her on the day of handover. And we were just astonished. And it's that planning from the very start. And again, I don't think it's a bad question to ask when you're designing the building, is who's going to actually operate this building? Are you going to go out to an FM maintenance company, professional company, in which case they need to be part of the team now?
Because they're idiots as well. The problem is, you're saying this, that FG20 is not designed for modern building.
Sorry?
So I don't think there's any point touching on post design, because the FM industry is not designed for post, or for FG20 does not allow for modern day operation. There's no point talking about handing it over to someone else on a contract until that whole point, the TIBSE guideline changes that. But ultimately, ignore the commissioning. This actually comes down to you as a designer. You should be writing down how it's maintained. You should write down clearly in your description how the BMS actually says, look at this, do that, check this, go back. It says, come back to you. As a designer, you're the one that actually should take responsibility for your operation going forward. And to make sure you design it in for that, the right sensors, the right other bits and pieces, the right interfaces with the equipment, to identify these problems at commission and post PC.
That's a really good point.
Thank you.
But
Sorry,
just one quick answer to that. How many times do our friendly PQSs, value engineer, is that the right word, out maintenance? So maintenance does, in a lot of specs, get specified for the first 12 months and what have you, which I think should be. But that's the first thing that goes.
If you're doing smart correctly, it's actually cheaper to implement than it is the old fashioned.
Yeah.
So that's the argument. It's designed in and there's no other option. And that comes down to the QS being out of date in terms of their cost that comes down to it. But all the savings that you're trying about, if we actually didn't oversize it at the beginning, everything sorts itself out.
Well, that gets back to our original point of it's that communication, it's understanding that we as building and service engineers need to speak up for ourselves in these meetings and going, this is why we're doing it, this will make it more efficient, and this will, it's bigger. I think, as you said, we touch every part of the building, sustainability touches every part of the building. So how do we sort of carry on the conversation? Sorry, did you have a question?
No, I was just reiterating that I think that we should be writing our specifications based on that it will be maintained in the future, so that if there's that when it comes to the handing over, that information already exists. And I think it was just already discussed.
I think it's just descriptions of operations and actually being a bit more articulate about how systems are operating. And honestly, that is something that engineers often struggle with, because we will often say that the operation is going to be, the BMS supplier is going to detail how it's all going to work. And
that's engineers.
No, they're not.
They're controlled engineers. They don't understand how a chiller works. So how can you ask them to actually write a control?
That's better.
That's very true, honestly. I can answer you a lot separate. Most smart engineers, that's the problem. Most controls people are qualified electricians.
I get this.
But it
Get good client, I do, I say,
Yeah.
they would insist that you bring along their maintenance team. They're in place while you guys.
No. Brick Stab don't take on the maintenance bit. Brick Stab do not take on the maintenance bit, full stop.
Well, I'm choosing the buildings good.
They don't, no, they're maintenance. They change around.
Well, I'm working with British Land at the moment and have done 4 projects. So I've been over at Regent's Place and currently over in Bishopsgate as well.
Okay.
And we do engage with their engineers. They do engage with their building management team all the time. I think there are other clients though that often have their maintenance contracts that they change year by year. And they then don't transfer.
That's not the maintenance team. That's
Yeah.
the technical service.
No,
manager,
they're
not the maintenance team.
Yeah,
That sounds like something, sorry, as part of the lesson is,
Yeah.
okay, we need to be clearer on that conversation and saying,
Yeah.
right, okay, actually, these are the people we need to talk to. You go in, we do it a lot with retrofits. So if you're going in, you're doing feasibility studies, you go in, you have a conversation with people actually they're doing the system. So I guess it's part of that.
I think a bigger bane, and it's on a similar note, is incumbents at the moment. So in the refurb world,
Yeah.
we really have a big issue with incumbent contractors.
Yeah.
And I've got, for instance, now we go there and we're doing alterations to a sprinkler system. I appoint the incumbent sprinkler contractor who then asks me, could you give me the drawings for the floor that you're refurbishing, please? I'm like, but you're the maintenance contractor that's looking after this life safety system on this floor. Surely you know what you are regularly checking and updating. And they go, we've never been given that before in our lives. All we do is go in every 3 months and check the valves this and ask them if there's anything leaking. And that's our maintenance agreement. And you're thinking, this is ludicrous in the industry. And like you said, they would charge me an absolute fortune because they think it's an open checkbook because they're the main contractor. It's a real frustration.
Sorry, it's an interesting conversation, so I'm sure we can talk about this. I'm conscious we're talking a lot about what we want to do better, what we could learn, what we're not such massive fans of. What do we do well? What do we like? What projects have you worked on that you've enjoyed and you want to sort of try and replicate as much as possible?
So I wrote down 2 or 3 here actually, and I'm just going to remind myself. So it's a job in London, and it's just interesting. It was again the landlord wanted as much space as possible, so gave you limited risers like you were saying, but we ended up prefabricating all the risers. So it's a 6-story new build, triangular risers in the corners of the building, like 4 cores on the outside, and we actually prefabbed the off-site manufacturer dropped them in. So 6 floors dropped in by cranes, slid down, which was a real good idea about how to make it so much easier to build in a tight riser. I remember another great job where we lifted 3 chillers in one day on 3 different buildings down, and that was quite a challenge. But recently, the most impressive I've had is that, I should say, I'm not just saying this because he's sitting next to me, but I've been working at the Royal Albert Hall for the last 6 years, and the biggest complaint the audience said there was the auditorium was very, very hot. So we came up with a scheme. So under the top tier of the seating now are 20 downflow units fed through chillers on the roof. All their pipework stainless steel, again, because it's looking after a 150-year-old grade 1 listed building that doesn't like flooding, shall we say. And then we managed to do that. We've got 1,000 grills under the seats of the top tier, where 800 supplying the air and 200 returning them. So we're creating this circular flow.
And everything's round.
And the place was shut, obviously, through COVID. The first day we started it pre-COVID. We finished it a month before they had their 150th birthday party. And I remember it now. They invited me right in the front because I think they thought, well, if the air conditioning fails, we can blame Mark and we can drag him out of the audience. It was 34 degrees outside in July 21, and they got 3 complaints from some of their elderly customers that it was too cold. And we all cheered. We all celebrated the day after because we knew we'd achieved it. So that was a great challenging job.
And this was after like years and years of people basically boiling bombs back in the upper tiers. So that was a fantastic retrofit project. There were a lot of challenges in that project. When we were going in underneath the rake stairs, we had no idea what we were going to find. We then had to model that, make sure all the volumes were correct. Incredibly well, very proud of the project, but I mean, a lot of it is, and if you talk about sort of projects you're proud of, is clients on that job, very technical, very understanding, very accommodating, and I think that's sort of
And fair.
and very fair with everyone, sort of fair with the design team. We all made mistakes, things have changed, and which is the nature of that sort of building. But I think that sort of mutual respect and I don't know, sort of just a common goal, I think delivered an incredible project. Yeah. So,
Your client now, out of interest,
yeah.
had he been there for quite a while?
He has been there for a while.
The project manager that they appointed was internal.
Yeah.
And he was the head of their building services engineering.
And that makes a hell of a difference when you've got someone who's
Massive,
massive.
understand.
He actually had a background in commissioning management, so and
Yeah.
engineering. So it's actually talking to a like-minded individual, which is a rarity, but it's
Yeah, if it was someone who was just like, you've got to get this done, got to do it, totally different. Yeah, totally different. You're right. It's
I'll answer it slightly differently. The jobs I've really enjoyed are the ones, funnily enough, I've had fun on. And there is still opportunity on site, so what have you, to do that, albeit in quite a stressful world. I think the ones you do tend to look back on a lot are actually the ones that you've actually done from start to finish. And if, again, I was telling anybody starting off in their career, there is nothing better than actually starting right at concept stage and seeing a job all the way through to sort of commissioning and beyond, because that way you learn all of the bits and pieces and the nuances. You don't learn a lot. My one of that was the old fish market at Billingsgate on Lower Thames Street, where I did have some quite challenging conversations about the make of air handling units with Sir Richard Rogers. And if you ever go in there, they were the bane of my life. They were freestanding recirc air handling units, big beasts that are made to look like prawn shavers. And trying to get him to understand phase velocity across coils, things like that, it's just mind blowing. But it's those ones that, you know, all of the jobs are challenging. We all have issues in jobs, but you have got to go out there and have some fun as well.
And I think just in terms of advice to sort of young engineers is, you know, try as far as you can to see projects all the way through the phases. And I must admit, a lot of times we see CVs where people have moved after 9 months or a year, like regularly, right? And I feel a bit of pity for them, because what actually happens is that as an engineer, you're often designing something you're not quite sure of that you're putting on paper. It's often really good to sort of see those decisions and those designs through. And as soon as you kind of pass it on to someone else, they'll say, how exactly did you think that was going to work? And then there's a discussion and there's learning. There's a massive opportunity for learning. So try see projects through as much as you can with mentors and just ask as many questions as you possibly can. But I think seeing projects through is important.
And I would just, because I didn't get my answer. I'm waiting. Now, I was just going to say, for me, it's about the people. I've always having fun, but building relationships with people. Throughout my career, I can go right back to some of the people that I work with and think we made a great team because we were on the same level. We were all going for the same goal. It was a project that we worked from beginning to end, and even now, I mean, I got invited by an architect that I worked with years ago, and it's their anniversary, and it's just those relationships are there to stay, you know, throughout your career, and you know you can call on them. So for me, it's about the people.
Brilliant. So before we wrap up, are there any more questions from yes?
It's a bit more of a soft skill question, I guess, but you guys are all leaders of different teams. I was wondering if you had any lessons learned when it comes to, I guess, managing people and mentoring younger people and advice for other people who might be looking to do similar roles in the future.
Always say yes to every opportunity. You know, that's the classic me.
Yeah.
because you never know what is going to come of that opportunity. So I've only just recently started saying no, because you do get to a point in your career where you're like, actually, I don't need to do this. But at early careers, say yes. I don't know if we all want to do one each, because I think I could go on.
I will say, so our last question, just to wrap it up, so we are sort of coming towards the end, and it leads very nicely on from what you said. How important are sessions like this, you know, for this sort of lessons learned, knowledge sharing sessions, particularly considering, you know, from the Young Engineers Network sort of in the room, again, on your point about mentoring sort of thing.
I think it's incredibly important. It's quite valuable. I mean, I don't think there's probably enough mentoring and enough. It's just often young engineers having face-to-face time and sort of proper quality time with a mentor. Often some of the challenges are, yeah, big team and you're one person with a mentor. I think if you can find a good mentor, so just stick to them, always ask questions, see as many sites as you possibly can, always put your hand up for commissioning, always put up your hand for site visits. Yeah, just enjoy the engineering.
I think, and actually the word face to face is so key now, especially because of what happened with COVID. And we've always talked about these meetings and the early collaboration and the early engagement. Face to face as well, it's got to be the only way to do this. And I know our office now is now full every single day, and the buzz in the office is so much better. And I know, especially for the younger people, it's so essential. I still remember in COVID, we did some networking and we were doing wine tasting, and I was seeing certain people and they were on Teams drinking wine while sitting on their bed because they were in a shared house as a young person, and they said if you're on a Teams you can't be in the kitchen. So there I was, and someone was tucking into different glasses of wine while sitting in his bedroom, and I felt so sorry for a young person there. And I think it's all about face to face, and it's all body language as well. And then, like, an email, how many emails do we get and we think it's good news, or it should be good but you read it as bad? Phone calls slightly better, but face to face is absolutely vital, and teamwork and collaboration, and like I said, having a bit of fun, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, I don't think you can lose that, but I also think the mentoring, we've been doing it in reverse. The older dinosaurs like me actually can learn an awful lot from you chaps and chapesses. Because that is, again, the brilliant thing about our industry. I look back to when I started, VRV, heat pump, well, heat pumps existed, but VRF didn't. And that, the way in which our industry changes, morphs, changes to deliver and react to certain challenges. Again, yeah, carbon measurement, things like that. Not even on the curriculum. We're always learning, but that also means that, like I say, dinosaurs are also learning from other people, and it's a brilliant opportunity. The other big one that I remember, a project director, and I'll have to be careful with my language, that said to me that's always run true, especially as you mentioned it earlier, Marianne. It is a very small industry. Very small industry. You bump into different people, and somebody said never on anybody on the way up, because you won't know who you'll need on the way down. And that has been such a great lesson for me in my life, and to treat anybody as you'd expect to be treated yourself in terms of management.
Anything to add, Marianne?
I would agree. That said, yeah. Yeah, brilliant.
One more question. It'd be good to hear from you guys. Where do you think the industry's going with regards to costs for projects, and particularly on design and having design consultancy? And we've chat these questions before. I think most engineers could probably give a bit more, but there isn't the time, or more importantly, there isn't the cost in the design and the time on the program, because clients want projects for cheaper and quicker. So that means there's not the money on the design side to put in the time which the engineers are capable of doing, and then on the delivery side, we're talking about things not working properly or interfacing properly. It's because this contractor strips out all the money to win the job, and they're just trying to get off the job. Which is, let's not discuss that bit. Let's talk about the fact. Let's talk about the fact that it's happening. So where do you think the industry is going? Do you reckon it might come to a point where it might be a bit of equilibrium with costing, or we're just getting lower and lower and quicker?
I'm thinking that clients are getting a lot more educated, in fairness to them, and actually aren't just going for the cheapest. It is a concern at the moment because, especially in a recession world, you're always worried in a competitive market that there's going to be someone that will, shall we say, try to buy the job because they've got a shortfall of their workload. And it is a slight worry at the moment. I think we've been talking internally ourselves about, is 2022 going to be a terrible year after 2021? And we thought there was a rebound from COVID. I think 2022 was record breaking in our world. And actually, I don't know, everyone was seen to be very, very busy. I think everybody now is still actively busy. I don't know if you guys hear about stuff before us. We want to hear about it as well. But I still think that the pipeline for this year is strong. And I do believe that clients are finally realising that the cheapest ain't always the best. And it's also about, they want a no surprise journey at times. They want guarantees that they want to get their projects at a certain time, so that they then can secure either a move from a current premises or incoming tenants if it's a speculative building as well. So
with all the carbon targets and things coming in, all these investment funds that are owning all the properties, I think they're all starting to realise that they don't want to get caught with a building that they can't rent, for example. So I actually think our role will sort of stay steady, and I think the importance of sort of engineering, I think, within a building will remain important. It certainly differs client side to when you're contracting side, because contracting is always a race. But I think the client side front end concepts, I don't think the programs can get any tighter. I think people are already sort of massively rushed to do things.
Great. I am sorry, we are out of time. There is plenty of food and drink, I'm sure, so we can carry on the conversation. But I would say a massive thank you to our panels. So thank you, Julian, to Ted, to Mike, to Marianne. Mark, sorry.
that's okay. Okay, pull Mike one side.
Long days, yes. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to you. It's been beneficial.
Thank you.
And thank you, Jeremy.
It's online.